Remember when the cinema releases of Barbie and Oppenheimer collided?
This is a national emergency.
It sent audiences into a frenzy.
Hey, Barbie.
Over what to watch first and how to simultaneously digest post-feminist theory, theoretical physics and the best soundtrack in years.
You can find me under the lights, diamonds under my eyes.
This is the best day ever.
It is the best day ever.
Today, brace for 2 blockbuster court hearings in the Bruce Lehrmann Brittany Higgins saga. Front listeners know this is where Lehrmann, a former political staffer, is suing Network 10 and its star, Lisa Wilkinson, over a 2021 episode of The Project in which a former colleague, Brittany Higgins, called Lehrmann a rapist. He denies any wrongdoing. This is the case that has captivated Australians, and while the original Blast Zone was a drunken Canberra drinks night, the mushroom cloud has vast implications for Australia's workplaces, our media, our political life, and pretty much every other bit of our society.
Why? Why? How about because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world?
There are at least 8 legal proceedings that have flowed from Brittany Higgins' claim that she was raped. First, the rape trial, which saw Lehrmann plead not guilty and a judge ultimately throw out the case after juror misconduct. The prosecutor said he couldn't push ahead with another trial because he was so concerned for the mental health of the complainant, Brittany Higgins. Then the defamation cases. Bruce Lehrmann sued news.com.au and the ABC, but those matters settled out of court. A former federal cabinet minister, Linda Reynolds, is suing Higgins and her partner David Shiraz for defamation over their tweets, and that matter's heading for mediation and possible trial in the WA Supreme Court. She's also suing former ACT prosecutor Shane Drumgold. There was an inquiry called by the ACT government into the legal proceedings around the rape allegations, and now there's a new lawsuit arising from that. We'll come back to that one later. And then the big one. Bruce Lehrmann sued Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson for defamation. Wilkinson hired her own barrister to sue Network 10, and those proceedings have been folded into the main defamation case. Justice Michael Lee is still writing his judgment, which could take many more weeks yet. But it's the Wilkinson 10 Barney that's up before the federal court in Sydney on Tuesday morning.
Lisa Wilkinson is suing her employer for not covering her legal costs in a way that she deems appropriate. Typically what you see with these defamation cases is you see a media organisation back in their journalist and a journalist back in their media organisation and them appear as a very united front. But there must just be something simmering away under the surface that is clearly associated with costs that has created this rift between Lisa Wilkinson and her employer.
Ellie Dudley is the Australian's legal affairs correspondent. Ellie, there's no doubt ultimately that Sue Chrysanthu SC, the barrister representing Lisa Wilkinson, will get paid. She will get paid.
She will absolutely get paid.
It's the question of when she's paid, right?
Yeah, correct. So this entire cross-claim is spawned out of this idea of whether or not Lisa's legal team should be paid as they go on, as they went on throughout the proceedings, or whether or not they should be paid at the end of the proceedings once the conclusion is wrapped up. What Network 10 has argued is that they would cover them at the end because, say, for example, Bruce Lehrmann is successful in this defamation claim. If there's costs associated, if they need to pay damages or anything like that, then it takes into account everything that that's related to. Whereas Lisa Wilkinson has said, look, I can't necessarily afford to pay as we go and wait for that lump sum payment at the end. I need you to pay my lawyers the entire way through.
Today's hearing turns on the issue of privilege. Now, of course, in media companies, journalists and editors consult in-house lawyers before stories are published for advice about things like the risk of defaming someone. Those communications between lawyers and journalists are privileged. That is, they're confidential and can't be obtained by people who might sue the publisher for defamation. But in this case, privilege is becoming the issue, isn't it?
And it's becoming this issue about whether or not it poses a problem that Lisa Wilkinson did retain her own legal representation that was separate to that Network 10 retained for these Bruce Lehrmann defamation hearings. From what I understand, the reason that she did that is because she believed that her interests were at odds with the interests of the media company for whom she is employed.
One of the crucial moments in the lead up to this trial was Lisa Wilkinson's speech at the 2022 Logies.
After 40 years in journalism, this interview and this story is by far the most important work I have ever done.
The judge was furious and delayed the trial after that speech, believing that Bruce Lehrmann couldn't get a fair hearing because of what Lisa Wilkinson had said. Lisa Wilkinson has insisted all the way along she was acting on legal advice from Network 10, hasn't she?
So Lisa Wilkinson has always said that she has acted on legal advice when giving that quite controversial Logie speech in 2022. She, in that speech, described Brittany Higgins as somebody who had unwavering courage. And hours after delivering that speech, she received a text from Network 10 CEO Beverly McGarvey saying, "Beautiful speech." But during the defamation trial, this one that was brought by Bruce Lehrmann, Network 10 refused to waive legal privilege over its advice. So Wilkinson's assertion was never backed up with evidence. So it was never really shown that she did receive that legal advice from Network 10. The other thing that we heard during the trial from Justice Michael Lee was that he was astounded that anybody would give legal advice supporting Lisa Wilkinson's speech at the Logies.
In a moment, former ACT prosecutor Shane Drumgold fights for his career, and the YouTuber who's found himself in the middle of this legal melodrama. While I've got you, we'd love you to get more of this journalism by subscribing to The Australian. Our subscribers get breaking news alerts direct to their phones, newsletters, special events, and the most lively and detailed news, analysis and commentary around the clock. Check us out at theaustralian.com.au. We'll be back after this break. In 2022, the ACT government called an inquiry chaired by retired Judge Walter Sofronoff KC into political and police conduct during the prosecution of Bruce Lehrmann. This was something Shane Drumgold had requested, but it didn't turn out as he'd expected.
Yeah, it did not turn out as he had expected at all. The findings from this inquiry were absolutely devastating for Shane Drumgold and actually resulted in him stepping down as the chief prosecutor in the ACT. Some of the things that Walter Sofronoff found was that Shane Drumgold made representations to Chief Justice Lucy McCallum, who was overseeing Bruce Lehrmann's criminal trial, that were untrue and an invention of his own. Walter Sofronoff found that Shane Drumgold was guilty of a serious breach of duty by failing to comply with the golden rule of disclosure that sits at the heart of a fair trial. He said that the DPP failed to adopt the rule of thumb used by wise and experienced prosecutors, which is, if in doubt, disclose.
Now Shane Drumgold's taking legal action against the Board of Inquiry, which was, of course, a creation of the ACT government. So this really pits him against Walter Sofronoff, who's, of course, a pretty renowned judge. He's the former president of the Court of Criminal Appeal in Queensland. Do you think Shane Drumgold is seeking to get his job back? Is that what this is about?
He is seeking to get his job back, and he's, I think, seeking to reclaim his reputation. He claims that Walter Sofronoff had an apprehended bias against him in conducting this inquiry and claims that he was unfairly treated throughout this entire inquiry and says that the findings from the report should be thrown out.
Of course, one of the little subthreads of that is that Walter Sofronoff's report was published first in the Australian newspaper. It was obtained by journalists working for the Australian. Shane Drumgold has added that to his list of grievances. He believes that demonstrates that there was a bias against him.
Yes. So what we know is that the Australian published the report first. We know that Walter Sofronoff gave the report to the Australian and also to the ABC under embargo. But we know that the Australian published the report first because journalists at the Australian also received that report from another source. So we know that columnist Janet Albrechtsen reached out to Walter Sofronoff the night before The Australian published the report, saying, we've obtained this from another source and we're going to publish it. And what Mr. Drumgold says that shows is an apprehended bias of Walter Sofronoff favouring The Australian and favouring columnists who showed a disdain for the way that Shane Drumgold was operating as chief prosecutor, and therefore the findings from the inquiry shouldn't be upheld.
There's another matter back in the federal court that should provide another thread to this story. A YouTuber named Glenn Logan has been ordered to appear before Justice Michael Lee in the federal court. Logan, whose YouTube channel Feminism Debunked has about 3,790 subscribers, allegedly posted several videos during the trial, including content apparently taken from the court's official YouTube stream of the trial. Why would that be a problem?
He's been ordered to front the court at 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday. And what we saw throughout the trial was Justice Lee, at the beginning of every single day, said this YouTube link is provided to everyone. Everyone from the public is able to view this. And with, great access comes great responsibility. Do not republish any of this online. Do not screenshot it. Do not make comment. All of those things, or you will be held in contempt of court. Glenn Logan is now having to come before the court today in order to explain to Justice Lee, or his lawyers to explain to Justice Lee, why he shouldn't be held of contempt of court when those orders were so clear throughout the entire trial.
I went and had a look at the Feminism Debunked page and all the videos have disappeared. There's no videos on the site anymore.
Oh, look at that. Very disappointing. I'm sure it would have been very entertaining.
Ellie Dudley is the Australian's legal affairs correspondent. Our scoops and analysis on this topic are unrivalled, from Janet Albrechtsen and Stephen Rice to Ellie and me, and of course, our deep dives right here on the front. Check out all our journalism and join our subscribers for less than the price of a sandwich per week at theaustralian.com.au.